Hello and welcome to Prime Lenses. I'm Ian. Each week I speak to a guest about 3 lenses that have meant something to them on their photographic journey. Well, usually. I'll be honest, this conversation with James was so much fun we didn't really formally touch on the lenses. What's more interesting is the all-time banger Prime Lenses story that he tells at the end, which is fantastic. You will want to stay tuned for that. James is an experienced photographer and creative director. I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation with James Bareham. We do the show.
Excellent.
Have you had a chance to listen to any yet, or are you coming in new?
I listened to a bit of started on Varians and then because obviously I want to hear that, but I didn't get very far because something happened. But and then I forgot to get back to it.
He is fabulous company. He was lovely.
He's very cool. Very cool.
He is. To be honest, I pinch myself a little bit, not to spoil that one for you a little bit, but when he talked at one point about, because I spoke to him just after Becca had done the review of the new Ricoh, the little GR,
right? And
she'd compared them. Actually, she compared it with the X100, the Fuji, right. And I was saying, in the video, and because she said in the video for that she mentioned people who'd been in her DMs sharing family photos and pictures with friends to convince her. And I said to him, it was me. He's like, I know, it was you. She told me. It's just this lovely little network of people. So it's funny how I'm refusing doggedly to look at the stats for the podcast, right. Because I feel like that's a healthier way to go. Because it might change the nature of the conversations in some way. And I kind of don't want to jinx it, but I think there might be dozens of us. It's quite exciting. It's growing legs. And one of the things I may regret this, but at the moment I'm sticking to. I'm going to resist looking for the longest time. But
I think that's very smart. It's I'm doing the same with this Made by Humans brand that I'm actually working on with Ross Miller, ex-Verge. And it's the same thing. It takes a while to build an audience, but it also takes a while to know how you want to build that audience, what you want to talk to that audience about. So we're still sorry, I'm doing the microphone here. I think you're wise. I mean, at the end of the day, we publish for ourselves, and then hopefully it finds an audience and it does what it does.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think there's it's funny, you see so much, especially because Threads is enjoying such a moment at the moment. So I'm seeing lots of people whose stuff I don't normally see. I'm seeing a lot of YouTube-y people in particular. And I think in the last couple of weeks, I've definitely seen people post the version of, here's when I don't make videos about art, because they show the difference in stats between here's when I talk about the things I'm actually interested in, and here's what happens when I post a video about a lens or gear or whatever. Right. And it's kind of a little bit depressing, because you think, well, what could you be talking about? What could I be hearing you talk about? Or what clickbait titles are we forcing people into making? Because the reality being, and I'll sound like Nilay, but the reality of that YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world. People go to it when they want to buy something. So inevitably the algorithm thinks that people only want to know about gear. And so the only way to get your thing to float to the top is for it to be about gear. And so then people make videos about gear. It's just this awful self-fulfilling. YouTube is filled with people, photographers especially, making videos about how they are desperately sad about having to make videos about gear, but nobody watches anything else.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, I think that there's so much about, I must remember to talk to the microphone. There is so much about it. Let me go back a step, in full disclosure, it's a while since I've considered myself a photographer. And what's interesting is I didn't start as a photographer. I started as an illustrator. And because I took so many photographs for the illustration, I reached a point where I was like, well, maybe I was spending more time on the photography and less time on the illustration. So I went into photography and then did that for many, many, many years. And I think it's what I've been thinking about, and in fact, I'm writing about right now, is how photography has changed in the digital era and in the equipment era. And one of the things I think is really fascinating is how, and it came up with the iPad Crush video, that, you know, I'm of a generation where I started with film and cameras and mechanical focus and mechanical exposure. And if you got it wrong, it was unusable. You know, I mean, people who shot Fuji Velvia film will know it was supposedly 50 ISO. It was no way. And quarter of, you know, half a stop under and it's dead. There's nothing. And so, you know, so much of photography became terrifying. And now, so when digital came along, when Photoshop came out, when all of these hangs happened, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I think, and I was thinking about this for this conversation today, that I moved from being excited about the technology of the cameras to being excited about the technology of the post-processing, the apps, the digital element of it. The camera was just the camera.
Right.
And because certain things, you know, lenses didn't change really.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting now that I see these conversations that you're talking about on YouTube and people deep diving back into this and this love of film cameras and people shooting film and getting all excited about it. And I'm like, film terrified me. I still, to these, you know, I still get regular nightmares about being on shoots and the film not coming out and disasters. And it was so stressful. And the larger the budgets got, the more stressful it became. I remember flying back from New Zealand with a bag with my assistant Charlie and me on the plane, and and I made him wear the bag for 3 days because you're terrified. This bag of film goes missing.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
bankrupt forever. So,
Yeah.
so like you say, I see these. I think that there's always been a gadget element to photography.
Definitely.
A lot of us did it because we got to have cool stuff, right? I mean, I can remember driving into the next town to see you know, the Nikon F3 in the window with the big motor drive and lusting after one.
Yeah.
And so looking back, I kind of forget that, and I mustn't, you know. I think it's great that people are still into that. They're still into talking about the nuances of this lens or that lens or this camera or that camera.
Yeah.
The whole thing over Fujifilm cameras is, I'm like, Dan and Becca and Viren are talking about that. I'm like, no, don't know anything about it.
Yeah. No, I'm actually terrified to handle one. I think, in truth be told, I spent so many years, especially, so 2019, I picked up a GR3 and my A7, my beloved A7, which I'd loved for years, was then consigned to a shelf, and the GR3 just went everywhere with me, and I adored that camera. I absolutely loved it. I did learn to use it. I did learn to drive it. It was slung across my body throughout the pandemic, basically running around the house, chasing after the kids, and just everywhere I went. I was the Torsten Overgaard thing of like always wear a camera, and I really did. I just everywhere I went, and it scratched an itch. It created when I needed an outlet specifically. So I think I will always love that camera very, very dearly. But I think the Fuji, I think, maybe occupies a similar space for people. Maybe they've been away from photography and then they come back to it, and it makes you the GR's a 7. It's got all the widgets and in-body stabilization and an incredibly good lens. And I think it's hard to buy a bad camera these days as well. Like, digital cameras have not always been a slam dunk. There were, there've definitely been times when you could buy a lemon. But these days, I think that's increasingly difficult. And if you do spend £1,000, £2,000, on one, what you find is that you've got a really great piece of kit. And so I suspect what happens is people who've been looking at their phone for such a long time are just blown away by what an actual decent sized sensor coupled with a decent lens can do. And I think that's where some of the hype and the madness comes from. And then once it's hard to get, well, then you're just off to the races, aren't you?
Yes, and I saw the comment or the comments about the comment that they're creating, deliberate scarcity to keep the prices up, which is like, if it works, baby, do it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think if they could sell them, they would. I think there'll be. If you met a sales manager from Fuji, he would be like, if I could get more of them, I would definitely get more of them.
I very much doubt that it's a deliberate thing. They're trying to spin something that's happening as a positive, and who can blame them?
Oh
I
yeah,
don't know. I don't
if
know.
you're in the business of making and selling things. But no, that Fuji does look great, and I think I'm frightened to use a hybrid viewfinder because I'm an M shooter, and I fear that I may really like it. I think I think if I used like an X Pro, I think I'd probably really like it, and it would be small and light with small lenses, just like I love about the M system, and it would probably have the added bonus of like even slightly sweeter color straight out of camera JPEGs, so a bit less futzing around. I do like the idea of having a camera for like to give you the look that you want to achieve, and then not kind of noodling with it too much.
You see, this is the funny thing, and not that we're going to keep talking about Verge things, but I know Nilay has been going on the what is a photo thing,
Yeah.
and honestly, I think that debate was settled years ago, because we had Ansel Adams, we had the photograph, the negative, the print,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think it's like, I always think of the photograph as capture, and then the rest is processing. And whether
Right.
that's developing film, or that's making a print, or that's using Photoshop, the capture is the thing of pressing the shutter. Now, when the camera is then making decisions about editing people out and all that kind of stuff, then I do think we get into a very strange world.
Yeah.
But for me, and again, I think this is, I tell people my first digital back was a Sinar that went on the back of a Rolly. And it was a 6.5 megapixel camera, that a back that I bought secondhand for £16,000.
Wow.
So, and that was like 2003. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's not that long ago, and shooting with it was terrifying, because it would, you'd lose connections and you'd lose images, and it was very rough. But just that, I think of the, if you think of the, I think of the photographic process myself as how I used to describe it to people, as it's the alignment of two images, the one in your head and the one that you capture. And when you
Right.
can line them up, you did it. But it's hard. It rarely does line up that way. So I've always thought about, once I started using cameras every day, I was a photographer. It was my principal career for well over 20 years. It's all I did. And I think that I was always trying to compress the process between taking a picture and creating a final, and owning more of that process.
Right.
And I used to use a lab in London called Metro Photographic. They had E6 labs in Chelsea and Clerkenwell and across the city, and then a main place. And I remember the year I changed from principally film to digital, I went from spending £120,000 a year with Metro to the following year spending £250.
Wow. Oof.
And it changes so much of the discipline of shooting, that I had jobs where I was given a budget of 20 rolls of film. That's it.
Yeah.
You can't shoot anymore. You've got to pay for it. So there was this price attached to taking pictures, which was why you didn't go crazy, and you were scared of motor drives and stuff like that. God, I'm sounding really old, and that's okay. But there was also a discipline in that. And I think, having been around sort of this revolutionary change, everything from, the first piece I ever wrote about, actually, the first piece I ever wrote for The Verge, the first thing I wrote was that smartphones changed photography. And I believe that. And I know a lot of people got bent out of shape because the iPhone was not the first smartphone to have a camera, but it was the first smartphone to have a camera that everybody used.
Yeah.
And it was the principal creation of apps. And if you think about it, when I'm talking about compressing those stages, that gap between capture and delivery, the iPhone was, you capture and delivered on the same device. That's why I loved phones. It actually got rid of a transference between switching from a camera to a computer.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that there's this cyclical, in fact, I said it to somebody the other day, is like the digital revolution creates analog revivals. if you think about streaming music, has led to a renaissance in vinyl.
Mhm.
And I think that, digital cameras and AI will create people are going to go back to shooting film. And it's about that sort of, it's not about creating more control. It's how do I create less control?
Yeah. It's that ties quite nicely into something I've been thinking about a lot, which will lead, I think, nicely onto kind of like maybe your first lens choice, but around seeking less perfection as well. Because I think my favorite lens now, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I'd have wanted more cleaner, better, sharper, faster, whatever. Actually, now I'm shooting with a manual focus camera set to maybe aperture priority at a push, but like everything else is sort of configured by me at the time. And I'm using older lenses and things by choice because I'm a tourist and I'm doing it for fun. So I don't have to kind
Mhm.
of, I don't have the pressure of delivery of like getting something like to the newsstand and it's got to be this and that and the other. But I'm choosing that, and I'm choosing lenses that maybe have a slightly more vintage feel to them. They're sharp in the middle, but they're not necessarily sharp edge to edge. And I'm not overly worried in my image making as well about perfection or perceived perfection. I'm quite happy with an image that's a little bit out of focus, but something interesting is happening with it in a way that I misunderstood photography for a long time. I misunderstood that optical perfection like that was somehow the goal, as opposed to communication through the image. And I think that's sort of I am today years old almost when I'm still learning that a little bit. Sort of it's an adjacent thing, I think.
I think it's, I think that's really interesting. I think the only caveat to that is what kind of photography you're doing.
Yeah.
So if you're a still life photographer, then your lenses and your capture is very, very different requirements to if you're a portrait photographer or you're a reportage photographer or a lifestyle photographer, whatever that means these days. And I think that, your subject dictates your choice of equipment half of the time. And then I think then you have the specialist. If you're a specialist photographer, particularly I go back to lifestyle, studio, then there's such specific requirements there that you just want everything sharp if you're doing that kind of, a big still life. But when you're shooting portraits, I think you're right. I think it's the fall off of the lens, the emotion of it, the accident of it,
Yeah.
the lighting of it. And I think that one of the lessons I learned when I first started using strobe flash was how much flash contributed to sharpness in a way I'd never really understood before. And so it's an accumulative thing, right? I think it goes back to, it's like recording music. Friends of mine back in the UK, I'm obviously in America these days, but are in the music technology side. And I was talking to a friend who works in the recording industry, and he said most studios have what they call the nasties. They're these Yamaha speakers that all studios have that are shit. And what they do is they've got all of their beautiful sound, all of their amazing speakers, and then they go, let's put it through the nasties. Because you want to have this kind of, this is what everybody hears, or this is the kind of the standard. And you'll know this in photography. We have these endless conversations of people going, oh, it looks too green. And you're like, but what are you looking at it on?
Yeah.
Are you on a color corrected? There is no, and again, I think one of the wonderful things about the iPhone in particular is it's created a standardization, which many people might think is bad. But when you look on an iPhone, it's the equivalent of the nasties.
Yeah.
It becomes, okay, what does it look like in Instagram on an iPhone?
Yeah.
And anybody around the world, 1 billion users will see exactly the same thing. So I think it's not about it being definitive, but it creates a nice sort of benchmark or a sort of level set for you.
Yeah, it does. I do think as well, the current digicam kind of craze that's kind of as film cameras and film just gets progressively more and more expensive, and people kind of migrate to, you know, point and
Retro
shoot
digital.
cameras. Yeah, point and shoot like a Canon Ixus or something from 2003 when you were sort of messing with that $16,000 back or whatever. But I
Mind blowing.
think that at some point the phones are kind of the next one of those. I feel like in the next few years I'm going to see people rocking iPod Nanos and iPod Touches again, and just because
Yeah.
the video mode on an iPod Nano is a vibe. My first digital camera was a 1.7 megapixel Fuji, and
Oh
that was
yeah.
great. And I was thrilled with the images I
Right.
printed on like an HP desk jet that we had at home. You went to a shop and bought like little 4x6 and printed little pictures on it, and you give that to family members. And I've had so much fun with those, and instant photography is still an absolute joy and a treat
Right.
for the world. So combining the sort of the digital and the print things, but it does sometimes surprise you just what it comes out with. You sort of just look at it and go, actually, especially in black and white, you kind of it's quite fun.
Do you remember there was a whole? I mean, it might still be out there, but I remember when Lomo cameras were just everywhere.
Mm,
It became the thing. It became a
yep.
style. Everybody's
Yeah.
shooting, like advertising campaigns were being shot, to be Lomo style.
Yeah.
And I think it's again, it's people searching for a vibe, like you said, a look and a feel. But it's also it's a way of sort of putting a literal lens or a literal filter on everyday life to give it a
Mm,
look.
yeah.
And I don't know what the equivalent of that is now. I think that again, I see, I scroll through Instagram and like everybody else, and I see the photography that's out there. But what's really interesting to me is I think that there's this, it's like everything in style. It's not about one thing, it's about a confluence of
Mm,
different trends coming together. And I think one of the things that gets lost these days is with the explosion of, iPhone photography, smartphone photography, the Instagram, Facebook, Snap, you name it,
mm,
social media. We've gone, if you go back to when I started in photography, which was the late 80s, if you think of the late 80s, probably 95% of the images you ever saw were taken by professional photographers and
mm,
or your immediate family.
yeah.
And people spoke about it. When I first came to the New York in the late 90s, people were queuing up, for the Abercrombie and Fitch catalog
Right.
shot by Bruce Weber.
Yeah.
It was an event.
Mm,
Um, the advertising shoots of those times, particularly the late 90s, brands like Versace or Ralph Lauren would put out a campaign of 7 or 8 pictures that would run for a year.
yeah.
The same pictures on the back of every magazine, every billboard, became a portfolio of content. And now we've moved to a time where it's completely the opposite. I think
Mm,
brand imagery today is more like a flick book than it is a
yeah.
poster. You don't get a brand through one image, you get it through this multiple of images and how they stack together and create
Mm,
these ongoing stories. But I think what that's done to the creative side of photography or even the technical side of photography is what it's done now is when pictures are too good. Car photography is a good one. I spent
mm,
a lot of time in car photography. And now when you see car shoots that look professional, people don't like them
mm,
because they're like, oh, that's an ad.
right.
What they're looking for is pictures. So you see car photography that's shot exactly like it was shot for an Instagram campaign.
Mm,
So it's people, there's a distrust if things are too good. It stands out.
yeah.
I think that Instagram has created a style that I fall for it the same as everybody else.
Mm,
You'll like an ad and you go, oh shit, it's an ad.
yeah.
I actually, but it's really good.
Yeah.
right? There's a style, they know how to fit it in. But when you get that dissonance between, you know, for want of a better word, amateur, 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 pro, amateur,
Mm.
amateur, amateur, you're like, ooh. So I think it's the capture process has changed uh, a lot of the general attitude towards photography.
Mm.
There's a, it's almost like, I'm not going to say reportage because that's misleading, but there's a kind of a realism that people
Mm.
expect because so many of the pictures we see are taken by people we know or we
Yeah.
think we know.
Well, yeah, parasocial. It is funny when I know what you mean. You're scrolling through. I follow Pete Souza on
Right.
Instagram. It's like one photographer, for example, and like you're scrolling through, and then suddenly you're like, oh wow, that's an Obama era White House photo, and it stands out as very different
Mm-hmm.
to dogs and people playing at street photography in the backs of people's heads, and it's I think the difference between good and good and just photography. I'm not going to say good and bad, but like the difference between people who do it for a living and have something to say and create images that are saying something versus people just like on holiday or travel or just doing whatever. I think has never been, in a funny way, never been more stark. But you're right that like they look almost the same together, and they certainly blend together in this endless scrolling shop. I mean, Instagram's more of a shop now. I think that's why I've been enjoying Threads a little bit, is because it feels a little bit. The photographers have taken over Threads for now. I'm sure it won't last, sadly, but I'm quite enjoying it at the moment because I'm seeing some images from people I don't know, and it's just a different feed for a minute. It's quite
I
nice.
I also love the great irony is I think photography looks better on Threads than it does on Instagram.
I
The
agree.
compression seems better. The
Yeah.
galleries are better. You can do it's really, and I think that the vertical style suits it. That there's a lot of, it's almost like obviously Meta got a chance to kind of
Mm.
create a new when they were doing Threads. They're like, oh, how can we make photography better on here? I'm sure, and it'd
Yeah.
be interesting to see whether some of that technology now goes back into Instagram. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think Instagram's on a path to becoming more TikTok, and then Threads maybe is kind of the, and I think all of these things kind of move. We're probably
Right.
10 years away because at some point the monetization is going to come. At some
Oh yeah.
point the people that run Threads currently have a blank check, I suspect, because this is their next billion user
Oh,
platform.
for sure.
So spend the money now, do whatever. This is the modern day version of move fast and break things, which would be like move quickly and acquire users, like is probably
Hmm.
what they're doing at the moment. And then at some point, the financial realities are going to come to bear. If I upload 5 pictures a day, that's going somewhere. People are seeing it. They've got to pay for that bandwidth. Like they're going to have to monetize this thing out the wazoo at some point, and then it'll
Oh,
be
of
the
course.
party will be over, and then we'll all complain, and then we'll talk about the Fediverse again for a bit, and Mastodon will get a few users again, and then someone will spin up something else. And I think that's the fairground ride we find ourselves on with all of these platforms because they're not ours.
I think what's really interesting for me, and I don't know if it's an age thing, and I'm acutely aware of that, um, because I'm moving from a position where new technology was I saw as universally good.
Hmm.
It was universally better because of my frustrations with analog technology, with film, and
Yeah.
with so much of what I wanted to do was reliant on other people doing it for me.
Hmm.
So there's something very empowering about so much of modern technology, but I think it's rather like the vinyl music. What I have said to people, and I think with a lot of these technologies, and I'll get audio files hitting me for this, but I don't think vinyl music doesn't sound better; it feels better.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think that there is the intrinsic creative sort of tactile quality of art, and I think cameras provide that.
Yeah.
What you don't get with an iPhone is there is something amazingly cool about picking up a really great camera, the way it feels, the way it smells.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I miss that.
Hmm.
I don't so much miss the photos, but I miss
Yeah.
the experience, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I'm very interested. I don't know if it'll happen, but I'm interested what the new analog ways of looking at imagery is going to be. I think that there's interesting things with, Google photo books and Apple photo books and all of these new ways of printing. I'd be very interested to see how can we find new ways to share that way, come off the screen. I think just having a physical, for want of a better word, analog camera, even though I know it's digital, but then it goes into the same pipe as everything else.
Yeah.
What's that separate world? What's that completely different thing that it isn't, to your point, it isn't somebody else's platform. It isn't there just to play an algorithm, etc. So I find that it's funny now. It's like my whole career as a photographer and to a degree as an artist, I never had any art on the walls. And where I live now, I have art on the walls. None of it's, well, actually one picture is mine. But it's actually other people. It's other artists and things. I'm very interested in that. And I'm also seeing it in photography. A photographer friend of mine in New York called Henry Hargreaves. And Henry is a fascinating a Kiwi, lived in Brooklyn for a long time. But what he does is he's kind of like a creative director who uses a camera to capture his ideas.
Right.
He is a photographer. He has a studio and still life, but it's a lot of ideas about food. And we have a print of his in our kitchen, which is he recreated Mark Rothko's paintings with dyed ice, with rice, colored rice. And so they're called rice co's. And
Very
it's
good.
genius. So I think I've become, I think my focus, and I'm not saying this is a general thing, it's a very personal thing, is I'm very much more interested in creative ideas now than necessarily saying, oh, it needs to be a photograph or a piece of music or an illustration or a graphic. I kind of like cross-discipline as well as cross-platform, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think it's mixing things up is where interesting things start to happen. And Merlin Mann, who's a podcaster and writer and sort of sometime broadcaster, I think, had this idea about when you're getting ideas down that you need to. He's a big fan of just a text document because then you start, and then in the process of getting your ideas down, then the thing tells you what it's going to become, and then you
100%.
work out what it is, whether it needs to be a spreadsheet or it needs to be a drawing or it needs to be whatever the best container is for that information. But you start with as plain and simple text as possible to kind of give yourself, so that you're not tricked into going down the wrong route. I fall into this trap sometimes. I make a lot of slide decks, and they sort of bewilder and baffle people. But it's a good way. A slide is a good kind of size for like a piece of information. There's a guy called Russell Davies wrote a book called Everything I Know About Life I Learned from PowerPoint, which if you've not read it is fantastic. And I love the way that he breaks down, because it also, the point he makes, which is not photography related but is quite interesting, in a world of information work, presentations are the one place where you can still play. You have templates for everything. An email is a fairly established format of a thing. A spreadsheet, when you work, you're often working with documents that have been passed back and forth, and there's kind of tribal company knowledge about how you do things in your day-to-day work. But a presentation, well, that's your ideas. And suddenly you can tell a story and you can do things and you can put a GIF in it to make your colleagues laugh, or you can, it's the one playground left to people who don't necessarily consider themselves creative, but they can actually express themselves without too many boundaries.
Well, Ian, you and I are going to be friends forever, because I am a huge maker of decks, not using PowerPoint, which is the world's worst program.
Yes.
But, to your point here, I've made a lot of presentations by time. And I used to talk about there's two kinds of presentation. There's the theatrical presentation, which is a presentation to a group of people in a room or online. And then there's the follow-up presentation, where you then back it up. And I said, presentations are like being in court. People aren't convicted because of evidence. They're convicted because of a story, and the evidence backs up the story. And I think it's, to your point, you get the opportunity to write words that can be a counterpoint to what you're actually saying. So people are looking at a thing and then you're talking about another thing. You can do it with images. And I think it's one of the joys of making portfolios. I used to, in fact, I got one back the other day. I should have got it here. But I used to do these custom portfolios. And they were made by the Wyvern Bindery in Clerkenwell in London. And Mark Winstanley was the genius, his name, who was there. And his claim to fame is Wyvern Bindery made all the books for the Harry Potter movies, the props.
Yeah.
And so I used to make custom books. We would print them out by hand. We got guillotines so we could bind them and all this sort of things. And it was like you could constantly change the flow of images. And one of the things I did is when I first came to New York and I was going to see reps, and there's this, which completely took me by surprise. They were like, but you have color pictures and black and white pictures in your book. What, you a color photographer or you a black and white photographer? And I'm like, can I be both? And they'd like, no. Or
Right.
you've got people and landscapes and cars. And it took me a long time. And again, this is not today, if this was then, is photographers had a style and everything they did was in that style. So if you did an ad, if you did a perfume shoot, whatever it was, you shot in the same way. Whereas and this is not, I'm not saying this is right. I'm just saying this is how I, in my career, grew up. I was like, my style was dependent upon what the client wanted. Right? If I was shooting, I did a lot of theater work. I worked with the Really Useful group in London, Andrew Lloyd Webber, doing theater productions. And I did Starlight Express and I did cross-processing because it made all the colors crazy and it was all blurred and it was very different. Or when we were doing Phantom of the Opera, I was using all the lighting in the theater and counting the seconds to build a static image because theaters are really, really dark, it turns out, and especially Phantom, which is black stage, black character, and one woman in a bright white dress. Try exposing for that. So I think where I'm going with this is I think that we're in a really interesting place right now where, to be clear, I consider the democratization of photography through iPhones, through smart, as a universally great thing. I think more people taking pictures is better. I think more ways to view pictures is better. More technology to take pictures is better. But from a personal perspective, and this is where we get to your lenses in a degree, what I've realized is the reason I don't have a camera anymore, I just have a phone, is because it's always the same. And I think the camera I would like to buy, if I could, would be a fixed lens. I don't even want to be able to change it. And I've been like that for a long time. Years ago, when I would set projects for colleges, I would talk to the students and they want to do different things. And one of the things I set is, whatever you want to do, don't care. But you can only use a 35mm lens.
Nice.
Because
that was your preference?
I think it's it comes back to, creativity is about restriction. And I think we've all seen, and I've suffered from it myself, if you have too many lenses, you spend too much time thinking about the lens you're going to use and not about the picture you want to take. And I found over the years, there are exceptions about, if you're shooting Formula One, you need a long lens. So, but I I worked for a while with F1 magazine, I think it was still called. And we'd do testing, and I was shooting testing on a Leica because I was close and I could get access and things. And also I wasn't there to shoot action. So I think it's that there's a kind of, we can break photography down into technical requirements. What are you there to do? But I think that it's like, if you can make the choice about what you want to do, my personal thing is to get to your lenses. The 35mm became the lens I would always revert to. If I couldn't make a decision, or I'm just going to have a 35mm, even if it was a second body.
Mm.
And with the Leica, it's the 35, the f2. I didn't have the 1.4. But then with the Canon, because I shot EOS for years, it was the 35 1.4. Just the best lens.
Yeah.
And then medium format, it was a 50.
Yeah.
And it was just, I'd use it for portraiture. I'd use it for everything. I did try for a while. I thought, I'm going to go to a 50 because that's really in. And I, especially when you got the 50 1.2 from Canon.
Yeah.
But I would always revert to that. When you're shooting and you can't make a decision, and you just put on the 35mm and you don't have to think about it anymore.
Which is what ends up happening with my beloved 35 f2.8, the Zeiss. It just lives on the front of my camera and never really goes anywhere. And occasionally what I find when I put the 50 on, because I have the 50 f2, the Summicron, and I love that lens. It's beautiful. Makes lovely, lovely images. It's a great pairing with a rangefinder camera because you can see a little bit around the frame. But there is something about the 50 that feels like cheating. There's just a little bit more compression, and there's just a little bit narrower field of view somehow, that it's a little bit like viewing footage at 24 frames a second instantly makes things seem a little bit more cinematic. I don't know what it is. There's some part of my brain that the focal length, probably coupled with it being an f2 as well, and you've got a little bit more separation from your background if you want it, just feels a little bit more like I'm taking a slice of the world. I often go more abstract with a 50 when I'm shooting with that, whereas the 35 for me is much more right, this is going to, and these days I'm shooting at 5.6, f8, like I want to capture things in a very documentary, I was here style. So like my son broke his arm last year, and when I got some, he turbo broke it. He did it really well. He fell out of a treehouse. It was an amazing, if you're going to do it properly. And he was fine. But the next morning we're in the hospital and he's sitting waiting to go home. And I've got this great photo of him, and it was in the hospital, and I didn't expose it very well, so the colors are a bit weird. But it kind of looks, because he looks pale and tired and confused, but everything's kind of in focus. You can see where he is. You get the setting. I've not tried to kind of just isolate him, or just like there's something quite satisfying, and I think it might be actually a reaction to seeing so much online that is trying to tell you that blurring the background is what good photography is. And I kind of maybe I'm reacting to that like I'm a very f8 and be there person at the moment, where I'm like, no, this was the scene.
It's interesting because I used to just shoot everything wide open.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, certain things that it's pointless, but because what I liked about the 35 is there's a degree of intimacy that you get from that lens that you won't get from a 50, because you can be closer, but you still get the slightly wide view.
Yeah.
And it's, obviously when you're focused in the distance, you can't tell that you're wide open, right? Because you need something in the foreground to throw it.
Yeah.
But I always used to try and shoot when I was just shooting for me, or if I was, covering sports or that kind of thing. It was always about that emphasis that you got through the depth of field or the lack of. And it's again the same when I used to. My other lens was the 80, and again as fast as you can get.
Yeah.
And again, it's that the portrait and the fall off. And I remember when I shot on I shot Hasselblad for a while, and I can't remember the lens. They're 80, which of course is a 50, but very fast. And I mean, it would be when you shot it wide open. I remember getting a shot where the eyeball was out of focus, but the end of the lashes were in.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is just absurd.
Yeah.
What am I trying to do to myself here? But it's. So I think that anything driven to its extremes becomes kind of a pastiche of itself. But I think it's that thing, particularly when you start photography, that when you first start shooting shallow depth of field lenses, and which tend to be more expensive, so when you can afford them, it's like when you get a tilt shift lens the first time, you're just like all the way this way, all the way that way, and then you get the pictures back and like, oh dear, that looks awful. But you have to, or a fisheye lens, or a whatever. You're right. It's like a good fisheye lens you'll use twice a year, if that.
Yeah.
But when you do, damn.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Then it's perfect. Yeah.
Then
yeah.
it's perfect. But
I mean, I say all of this now. I don't own anything quicker than f2. So when I eventually inevitably cave and get a Sumalux of some sort, then see my hypocrisy as I run around shooting at f1.4 for a while whilst I get the feel of it. But
it's hard with a rangefinder, though. I mean, that's a you got to do, it's practice. You got to do it a lot, and I think I did try is it the 1.0?
Oh, the Noctilux,
not the Noctilux once.
I
borrowed one. It's like, that's a nightmare nobody needs.
No, that feels to me like a portrait lens. There's a portrait photographer whose name I forget. I was looking at her work recently. She was doing some promotional stuff for Leica and talking about using a Noctilux. But she shoots these incredible portraits of famouses for things like The Guardian. And she gets like, I don't know, 5 minutes with Keir Starmer, or 10 minutes with whoever. And so, of course, you're trying to create something out of potentially nothing. Like, you might be in a stairwell in a government building, and you've got to kind of use whatever tools at your disposal to try and turn that into something interesting. But she takes astonishing photos. But I do find, I think it's a taste thing and a mood thing for me at the moment, is that I might also be reacting to the way that smartphones have such good, or they're trying so hard to blur backgrounds and things like now, and my webcam is doing it right now to obscure the kind of hodgepodge of stuff behind me. I think that is training people to think that like that is good photography, and I'm riling against it maybe a little bit in a kind of like, don't tell me how to shoot. Like, I'm going to use my favorite lens will be an f2.8 35 Zeiss.
I agree with you, and I think it's fun to try these things. Again, I think you get it wrong, nobody dies. It's you're not going to get fined. It's okay to experiment with these things, and it's okay to try it and do it, and it's also okay not to do it. And I think, to your point, I remember when Saving Private Ryan came out, there was in the cinematography world, there was a lot about the custom lenses that were built for that. Because in the opening scene, I don't know what the exact focal lens, I've forgotten now, but the way it was shot, the lens that was built, everything is sharp. And it's designed to be exactly the same as a human eye. So the field of view is designed for you to always feel like a human, and to have this artificial, because as humans, we're not aware that we have depth of field. We perceive that everything is sharp all the time. And so they kind of shot it like that. And when you look at it, it's crazy how everything is sharp, apart from very specific, deliberate shots. And it gives this sense of you're literally there. And so I think it comes down to style. I think it's the choices of the tool you're using is the best people. I mean, I really think, and it's not even a judgment call, but it's the kind of the photography I like. It's a perfect pairing, the lens and the subject, the moment and the equipment. It's, if you can see one or the other, you kind of broken the fourth wall a bit. It's like, you shouldn't be aware of how a thing is taken. I believe, again, these are not declarations of truth. They're just my opinion, which means nothing. But I do think that when I see a picture I really appreciate, it just looks right. And I might not even know why, and I don't care. So I think particularly when you start to look at sort of seminal pictures from history, so many of them aren't very good pictures if you wanted to break them down, but they're perfection in so many other ways.
Yeah.
So I think that that's always been my balance. I love to nerd out about equipment. I worked, I years ago when I was a sports photographer, I got a camera sponsor because I thought, well, hang on, all these sportsmen I know have sponsors. I'm a photographer. Can I have a camera sponsor? And I was sponsored by Contacts. I loved it. Loved Contacts when they had the 645 and all of that. And of course, it's Zeiss lenses, and
Yeah.
shot the RTS3, I think it was, and had the 200 f2 Zeiss lens and all of this. I mean, it wasn't free. I bought it and I got a good price. But, you know, shooting with manual focus Zeiss lenses at 35 mil, it showed. But in the end, it became a barrier to what I had to get.
Yeah.
That it was like, is it that much better than a Canon EOS? Well, possibly technically, yes. But does it make that much difference to my work? No. And in fact, the difficulty of it, not having great autofocus, not having a range of lenses to call upon, becomes problematic.
Yeah.
So I think it's like, and again, I'm talking very much from the position of and I don't mean this in a superior sense, just as in a practical sense. I was a professional photographer. I'm a plumber. My tools have to do the job that they're required to do.
Yeah.
So I think it's I was always sort of on that cusp of when things got too nerdy.
Right.
I think I reverted to, well, I used to use paint. So I can only go so far to this. And also I think it's something that you learn in production, actually, when you're doing photo shoots and you're putting in production, and it's like, how much of this budget can we put into the image, or how much of this production can we put on the screen? If we can't see it, why do we care? Right? So it's like, worked with DPs who will have, you know, insane camera packages of lenses, and they're like, are we going to see that on the screen? Really? It's a lot of money. Could we use that somewhere else? So I think it's when you see it being used well. I shot stills on a series of, this is going to date me. It was called Vodafone Live with David Beckham, Michael Schumacher. And it was a number of shoots around, and the DP was Bob Yeoman, Wes Anderson's DP. So I worked with Bob Yeoman and his team. And I'd never seen a focus puller work. He was shooting 35 mil.
Right.
In rehearsal. So much money just
Yeah.
burning this film, right? But the focus puller and Bob and these lenses were so fast, like absolute gnats focus. And the focus puller's just doing this. He'd go out he'd measure it, some of it, and then he would just go tick, 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 with this remote thing. Wow. And you're watching on the monitor, just snap, snap, snap. Absolutely unbelievable. Unbelievable when you see it, because he can't see what he's focusing on. He's just looking, and he's judging it through distance. It's one of the most remarkable technical things I've seen. And of course, that's what they do. They make movies. He does that all day, every day. But when you see people at the pinnacle of their craft with the very best equipment, and you see what it can do, you go, oh, okay. Yeah. You know, I mean, I'm a big Wes Anderson fan. I'm a big Bob Yeoman fan. I mean, if you see like the French Dispatch or stuff like that, you look at how these incredible. Are living photographs.
Just every frame of Grand Budapest, same thing. Just
unbelievable.
Wow.
Unbelievable attention to detail. So it's like, and I think that, but it's the creative there, the way that they're working is completely symbiotic with the subject and the writing and everything else, right? It's like everything has to work together to really come through. We're going on a deep dive here, but you know what I mean. It's like, I think it goes back to that. Does the equipment and the subject and the moment all work together?
Yeah. Yeah. That, and earlier in the conversation, you mentioned about like iconic moments and sort of history and things like that related to image making as well. We're speaking obviously a couple of days after a moment that I think will be defined by the photographs that were taken, the attempt to kill Trump at a rally, and like those photographs feel to me like that is one of those moments where you're just like, oh, photography is telling this story. The photo of him defiantly with his fist in the air from below, like, is just going to be a photo of the ages. Like, it seems to me like the one of those moments where you're like, that's the power of a photograph, because it immediately tells you so much about what just happened, how that person feels about it, how they're trying to, even use it, even in that moment, it's astonishing.
I I agree with everything you've said, but I think that there's a very dark side to what you've said. In that it's also shown how misleading photographs can be. Because if you look at the footage, I'm not saying it didn't happen or it was fake. It wasn't. It absolutely happened. The photographer, Doug, I can't remember his second name, apologies. Astonishing photographs.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is a split second after the defiance, he looks scared.
Right.
And weak. And I don't mean weak metaphorically. I mean weak physically.
Like a person who's just been shot.
Yes, yeah. Who is in shock. And so you have this image, which is astonishing. And I want to be very, very clear. I'm not in any way trying to diminish what an incredible photograph and an incredibly experienced photographers got. But what's interesting is these pictures are now being used to create fabrications and lies and disinformation, saying, oh, look at that photograph. And I don't want to get all political, but this is important. You know, the female agent who, let's be clear, is risking her life. People are saying, oh, look, she's ducking and exposing him. And this is a conspiracy theory that's happening on X right now. So I think it's unfortunately what we're talking about here is the confluence between the technical prowess of taking a great photograph, but the reality of July 2024 and platforms and algorithms and disinformation and fake news this is being used as evidence because it's real to push a theory that is completely not true. And so it's interesting what it does to me. I completely agree with you. Again, I'm being careful with my words because I think this is a subject with which we have to be very careful. The pictures are incredible. The fact that Trump has that incredible performance ability to instantly do something that he knows how it will come across was astonishing. And that it was captured in the way it was. But what it has made me think, looking at those photographs, but also looking at the footage from both the professional coverage, but also the handheld footage, is I don't think discrepancy is the right word, but it's almost the dissonance between what the picture is showing and what the reality of the video
there's more to the story,
there's a hell of a lot more. And it made me think, when you mentioned this, it made me think about what are the great moments through history that we go, oh my God, this defines this thing. What would the video have shown? What would a split second either side have shown? So
the stakes are not always as high with photos that you look at. I think that's like some iconic photographs, like the stakes aren't always as high as they are now, for sure. I saw some footage today that was doing the rounds on Reddit, which, because I wear these Wayfarers as my daily glasses, and they have a camera in. I wore the Snap spectacles before that. They were my daily glasses. Like I've loved having a camera on my face since 2015. It's hilarious.
I did
and fun.
Google Glass for a while, but only in private because it was the most embarrassing thing to wear.
Sure. It was directionally correct. We can say that. It just looked a bit odd. But these incredible. And I saw some footage that was from that event of a photographer shooting the event, and they obviously had a pair of these on as well, because I assume it was these because they seem to be at eye height, and I doubt they were wandering around with a GoPro strapped to their head. and it did show you kind of the chaos of things moving around. You couldn't really see much of what was going on, but seeing these photographers working at the base of this thing, of this big podium, and they're just moving around, they're just getting on with their job whilst chaos is happening around them was quite astonishing. I think we will see more of the video. We'll see more of the moments probably around things, and then
Right.
in future. And then I think, being a student of history, the words of my old history tutor are ringing in my ears, where he's like, history's all about sources, Ian. It's like the quality of sources. And as you're saying, like, it would be interesting to see either side of some of those pictures.
Absolutely. And it's funny that we're talking about, you know, an assassination attempt. So of course we're going to go to Taylor Swift next,
Of course.
because we are. And it's actually the opposite of what I've just said, in that there's so much footage of Taylor Swift on the Eras tour. And I remember this picture. I can't remember where it was from. I think it was Paris, because I remember it was about the European, and she'd introduced a new track, and I don't know what it's called, but she's wearing white. It's a white costume, and she has the mic up to her, and it's so powerful because it's a photograph.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's the opposite of the Trump thing. I mean, let's be honest, I'm not equating the stakes of Taylor Swift and Donald Trump in the same thing. But I think that because there is so much content of Taylor Swift, some people would say too much.
Right.
I would not be one of those people. There was something, this one picture has captured the tour that I have seen. And like I said, I'm not looking at that many, but in a way that no other picture has come close to it.
Yeah.
It was just fierce.
Yeah.
And I think somebody put it up on Threads and said, this is my queen. I will follow her wherever she wants to go. And it was nice. I think it's like, so to tie this up, I do think that the pictures of Donald Trump and an attempted assassination, let's be thankful it did not work.
Yeah.
And then, something as iconic in a different way, but the Taylor Swift tour, I think it's like, the answer to what we're talking about is photographs and video do different things.
Yeah.
And they have different values. And I think you're right in that those photographs of Donald Trump will be something. For now, other things will happen and we'll see that. But I think, not to take it away. And I think it's, the pictures, something that we've never seen, as far as I'm aware, were the sequence on the front of the New York Times where you can see the bullet.
Yeah, that's pretty astonishing.
That's mind-blowing.
Yeah. No, time and access for sure, and just the right place, right time. It's Doug Mills is the photographer.
Yes, Doug Mills.
I'm going to try and get in touch in some way, just because why not? Because it seems fascinating. Like, how do you feel now to have captured such a, because it's everywhere. Everyone wants their photographs to be seen, but that's not just being seen. That's being talked about.
It's defining a moment. I think there is a video on the New York Times of an interview with him.
Yes. Cool.
That you can see.
Yeah.
And not to bring this back to me, but it's some context that years ago I was a sports photographer for the Mail on Sunday. And, when significant news events happened, everybody scrambled. And the day of the Bishopsgate bomb in Docklands. And I got the front page of the paper that day because I had no idea what I was doing. And I want to make that really clear. It's the opposite to Doug Mills, who knows exactly what he's doing and has been doing it for years. But I was called down to a terrorist attack, and I had no idea that there were police liaison officers for the photographers and that everybody met at a certain place. And so I just wandered off. And I wandered down. It was around the back of Bishopsgate. And I remember walking down these alleys, and you could see where the blast wave of the bomb had gone, because all the glass is fine apart from the corner where it just went straight through and knocked straight into a shop. And I walked around and I came under this, I can't remember where I was. It upset the editor later that I didn't know where I was, but enough of that. And I walked under this overpass, and behind a pillar, there were these workmen, and they said, hey, look over there. There's the engine from the truck, from the bomb. And they said, here, have this hat, because there's glass falling from stories into the street. You can't see the tarmac of the road. It's just covered in debris.
Wow.
And I walk up to the next pillar, and I walk round it, and I got my little hat on. And there's a policeman and a policewoman stood behind this pillar that I couldn't see. And to quote the phrase, they're like, what the fuck are you doing here? And I said, I'm just going to take a picture. And they're standing there like, the fuck you are. And I am. And I had a, a 2035 zoom. And I just cranked it to 20 and just literally fingers down their hand like this until they said, if you don't leave, we're going to arrest you. So I left. And rule number one that I learned at newspapers the hard way, never, ever tell anybody on a picture desk you've got a picture until you've seen it. Right. Remember, this is film, so I've no idea.
Right.
No idea. And I spoke to, actually, it was the sports pictures editor on the desk, and he's like, where are you? Where are you? Have you got anything? And I said, oh, I think I got something. And I described it to him, and he's like, yep, not saying a word.
Right.
And drove back, and Mail on Sunday was in Derry Street off High Street, Ken, and ran into the building. We kept it quiet, went up to the dark room. These guys in the dark room could process film. I don't know how they did it. They boiled I don't know what they did. But like in 10 minutes, they had prints.
Wow.
And went over to the picture editor, and there's this print of the street, and just handed them print. He goes, fuck me. And the whole newspaper. People are coming round, where were you? And this. And I'm like, I was here, and this was the corner. And then I hear, where's that fucking photographer? The way that people spoke in newspapers probably wouldn't get away with it today. And they said, you said you were there. And I said, yeah. And he said, no, you can't have been. That doesn't exist. And they were really angry because I didn't know where I was. So my point of this story is that, unlike this thing that happened with Trump, that number one, Doug Mills's genius is not that he can get these pictures, but that he can get these pictures every time something happens. He knows where to stand. He knows what's going to happen. I've learned that one of the cornerstones of creativity is not the ability to do something. It's the ability to do something consistently. Mm-hmm. Talking Bob Yeoman, it's like they know how to do it every single time. And I think for me, it was a great day. It was an exciting day. It was a scary day. But I knew I was a one-off. It was a fluke. I was in the right place at the right time, and I was only there because I had no idea what I was doing. And I think it's, it's the same picture editor, something about, I should go and do that in an event. He's like, don't be that fucking stupid. No, you're not doing that. They know you got lucky, and that's okay. So I think as photographers, one of the things that I think bringing this back now is like, all of these conversations about, go back, to Vera and to Becca, their ability is to do it every time. And that is a quality that people don't talk about enough. You can do it when you don't have the time, you don't have the resources, the weather's not great, whatever. You still can pull it out. You can still deliver it. You can still get it up in time for embargo, whatever. And I think it's not to say that one thing is better than another, but it is to say that when people are judging, the work that they see, you look at Marquez, the consistency of Marquez's videos is just astonishing to me.
Yeah.
The consistency of his performance, how he is on camera. Mm-hmm. He's just an absolute pro. He turns up, performs, brilliant. And I think it's something that we don't talk about as creatives when we're talking of other people's work, is it's not just this moment, this one image. It's what is the body of work? We're talking about the Trump image. What are the images either side?
Mm.
And I think is just something that I don't think people talk about enough. I don't think it's something that we understand enough.
Mm.
And it's that ability to be, shouldn't keep saying, it's the ability to be good on a podcast, the ability to be a sportsman and turn up and deliver when you might not feel like it, or it just doesn't feel like, is to pull it out.
Yeah.
And photography is no different. It's like you see the pros who they can always get a picture. This was something I used to say at The Verge. The closest analogy, I think, to being a creative on any kind of publication today is you're like a restaurant. You serve lunch and dinner every day. It's always got to be good. It's always got to be consistent. And occasionally you have to have specials and they have to be good. It's that thing of, it's a very New York thing. If you go back to the same restaurant every 3 months and have the same dish and it's identical.
Yeah.
But that restaurant also keeps doing things that keeps it relevant. And I think that's my biggest takeaway from my career, is being around people who have the consistency to give people what they want. And then to have the wherewithal to create something extraordinary every now and then, and people go, holy shit.
Well, that is probably a lovely note to end it on. There's a nice big bow to tie on it. You've done a much better job than I normally do wrapping this up. Thank you very much for giving us a nice little thing.
I try.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up fully, is there anything you want to point people to, or if they're interested in sort of learning more about your work or things you're working on?
I'm at happycamp.com, but I'm very proud of the work I'm doing with Ross Miller, who is one of the founders of The Verge, with our mbh4h.com. And it's an exercise in creating a micro media company of writing words, making imagery, putting them online, building an audience, very much like you're doing. I think all of us can do. And I think that's one of the most exciting things about being a creative in 2024 is we can do it. We don't have to ask anybody's permission. And that's kind of exciting to me.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, we'll hopefully send a few people your way. It's like web rings. We need to bring web rings back. We'll be part of a creative people web ring.
Well,
those were the days.
I'm inspired now to go and think maybe I need to go and get a camera.
Well,
I think I'm going to have to get a fixed lens.
Do it, my friend.
I never want the choice. Choice.
No. Well, I mean, I'm biased, but like a GR3, it fits in every pocket. It's extremely good. New one has a fuzzy little sunny days filter, if you like those sorts of things. Like soften your highlights, make it look like it was taken in the 70s. Thank you so much, mate. I really loved that.
Me too. Thank you.
Hopefully speak to you again soon.
Indeed. Well, all the best.
Take care. Bye.
Wish you. All right. Bye.
Well, that was fun. I enjoyed editing that one. It's my birthday today. As I'm editing this, I am officially 45 years old as of the point of recording this. So it's okay. There's still time. I will accept gifts for, let's say, 10 days. Should we say 10 days? I hope you enjoyed this conversation and that you found it to be a little gift in your podcast app. If you like the show, you can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And tell your friends, invite them over, sign up to the newsletter, sign them up to the newsletter. That's on ianfarrell.com/sign-up. And let's do this again next week. It was fun, wasn't it? I'm going to go and eat some carrot cake. Have fun. See you next time.